Sup nerds, Tom here, and today we're going to talk about voices in my head. And now this is ultimately, I would probably categorize it as like an area control game, but the method by which you are controlling the areas is with this like pushing discs to try and push other discs off of platforms type of mechanic. It reminds me a lot of those like coin machines. You'll see it like Chuck E. Cheese or whatever with a big thing that's constantly pushing coins and you're like just dropping coins and I don't know, maybe strategic areas so that it pushes off other coins. And I mean, the theme of the game is that, we're all sort of voices in this one person's head of somebody who has committed a crime or is on trial for a crime, and the different voices in their head is trying to convince them one way or the other of how to answer the judge's questions, and that will ultimately influence the jury. And that's like ultimately how you win. So everybody gets a hidden role, right, of like a secret way to win the game out of these different jury members. You want this many to think that he's guilty, or this many to think that he's innocent, or this many to be undecided, and tons of little ways like that, tons of variations, which is one of the main complaints that one of my buddies had about the game, was that some of them are harder than others, especially since there's a prosecutor. There's one player who plays kind of like a DM, like you're still an active player, you still want to win. You just want the person to be guilty, and you have a lot of ways that you can make the person guilty, and you're the only one whose goal is sort of public, that everybody else knows. And given that like the people who want you to be innocent, that's going to be a lot harder, given that we know that there's always going to be at least one person who's constantly putting out guilty. And that player does also kind of run the game a little bit. There are these cards that are the questions or whatever that the prosecutor is asking the character, and there'll be information on the card that the prosecutor will know that the other players won't know, and then there'll be information on the back of the card that neither of the players are supposed to know. And it's a bit of a random type thing, because I'll show two different areas and like, hey, whoever controls these different areas will probably get to have influence, in the game at the end of this round. But you don't know what that influence is. Maybe it could literally be placing guilty or innocent tokens on the characters, or maybe it's just like drawing more of these special ability cards that are pretty good. You definitely want to have those. And the areas on the board will tell you kind of, sort of, what to expect, but since they're not specific, you can't really be super strategic about it. It's a little bit more silly, and I think that's the overall idea of the game, is that this is more of a silly, light beer and pretzels type game with some strategery mixed in there, and that can be both good and bad. I know some players who kind of like that idea and some who kind of hate that idea, and I can understand it, going both ways. There's another game that I reviewed a few years ago called Guardian's Call, I believe, that had a lot of strategery. There's a lot of game there. There was advancing on tracks and set collection and a lot of different things like that. And it all hinged on this very silly mechanic of like a kind of weak bluffing aspect. I mean, imagine if you were playing Lords of Waterdeep and every time you placed a worker at a worker placement spot, you like flipped a coin, right? I'm probably exaggerating a bit too much, but this is that same type of idea where there is strategy, there's game there that hinges on being able to push a certain token off of a little platformy thing. I mean, I think if comparing it directly back to that Guardian's Call game, I think there is less strategic game that is hinging on a slightly more strategic, less silly, and probably a mechanic that you have a bit more control over. But overall, it's still, you're gonna do math in your head. You're gonna like be saying, okay, well, this is exactly what I need to do to win. And then you go and push something and you think it's gonna fall off and it doesn't. And you're like, okay, but you have to be okay with that, because that's the type of game that it is. And if that idea bothers you, then yeah, this game isn't for you. And I do think that this game is not going to be for everybody, and probably won't be for most. This is a very niche type of thing where I think a lot of people will feel like it's too strategic for the silly game people and it's too silly for the strategic game people. However, I did overall enjoy it. I mean, I think it's fun. I think that for the people who are going to like it, they're going to like it a lot, It's very unique. It is certainly unexpected. Okay, we're done with that. But I do think I have some friends who will probably never play it with me again, and that's fine. And I think this is definitely an experience that will be a lot better if you have some beer and you're a little bit silly and you don't take it too seriously. But if any of what I was talking about in this video sounds interesting to you, I'm going to put a purchase link to this game in the description box down below. Go ahead and get yourself a copy. Also down there is going to be a link for Game Toppers. They're the sponsor for Neverboard Gaming. And also while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you'll never be bored.